The palace of Lithariel floated above the violet oceans like a wounded crown, its crystal towers dimmed by morning lights and silent corridors. Inside the inner sanctum lay Princess Aelthria, last heir of the Starborn line, her once radiant skin now pale and fractured with fading biolight. Healers from 100 systems had tried and failed, their advanced technology powerless against the unknown decay consuming her body. The royal family stood helpless, emperors and queens reduced to silent watchers as the life of their daughter slipped away. Far below the palace, in a restricted service wing meant only for drones and maintenance staff, a human named Elias Carter worked nervously. He was not a soldier or a scientist, merely a contracted technician brought from Earth to repair atmospheric stabilizers. Humans were rare here, tolerated for their adaptability, but dismissed as biologically insignificant. A sudden tremor shook the palace, alarms chiming softly as a power surge rippled through the structure. Elias was thrown off balance, crashing through an unlocked door that should have been sealed by royal decree. He tumbled into a chamber, glowing faintly with alien runes and harmonic light. Before he could react, he was surrounded by guards, energy spears raised and humming with lethal intent. But then the room went silent as everyone realized where he had fallen. He lay at the foot of the royal bed, his hand resting against the princess's bare arm. A gasp echoed through the chamber, followed by shouts in the ancient Lithari tongue. Touching a royal without permission was punishable by immediate execution. Touching a dying princess was sacrilege beyond measure. Elias tried to pull away, terror flooding his veins, but his fingers would not move. Warmth spread from the point of contact, pulsing gently like a heartbeat not his own. Then the impossible happened. The fractured biolight beneath Princess Aelthria's skin flared, bright and steady. Her chest rose with a deep, sudden breath. Color returned to her lips as the decay retreated like shadows before dawn. The royal healers froze in disbelief, instruments screaming with impossible readings. The Empress stepped forward, her voice trembling as she whispered a single word. "She is healing." And the human was still touching her. The chamber erupted into chaos as guards moved to seize Elias, then stopped as the princess's pulse strengthened. No one dared interrupt the phenomenon unfolding before their eyes. Royal scholars activated ancient sensors long abandoned by modern science. Every reading confirmed the impossible truth. Princess Aelthria was recovering. Elias felt a crushing pressure behind his eyes, memories that were not his own brushing against his thoughts. Stars collapsing, songs sung in light, grief older than planets. He cried out, not in pain, but in overwhelming sorrow that did not belong to him. The Emperor raised his hand, halting the guards once more. For the first time in centuries, uncertainty flickered across his ageless face. "Do not remove him," the Emperor commanded. "If this human is the reason she lives, then he is under royal protection." The healers watched in awe as the princess's wounds closed seamlessly, her breathing stabilizing into peaceful rhythm. Her biolight adjusted to match the strange energy flowing from Elias, as though recognizing something ancient and familiar. At last, Elias' hand slipped free on its own. He collapsed to the floor, unconscious, his body drained but unharmed. Princess Aelthria stirred, her eyes opening slowly, revealing irises like molten starlight. She looked around in confusion, then fixed her gaze on the human lying at her side. "Who is he?" she asked softly. The room fell silent again. No one had an answer. Elias awoke in a chamber far more comfortable than any cell, guarded but respectful. Across from him sat the royal council, their expressions a mixture of fear and reverence. They spoke of an ancient prophecy buried deep within Starborn history. Long ago, it was said that life itself once intertwined freely across species. that the Starborn were healers not by technology, but by connection. That one day, a being untouched by cosmic arrogance would restore what had been lost. Humans had been overlooked because they possessed no biolight, no psionic dominance. What they possessed instead was adaptability, empathy, and a strange resonance with living systems. Princess Aelthrea requested to see Elias personally, against every protocol. When they met, the air shimmered softly, responding to their proximity. "You did not save me by accident," she said gently. "Our lives touched for a reason older than both our worlds." Elias struggled to understand, but he felt it too. A bond not romantic nor political, but fundamental, like gravity between souls. News of the miracle spread faster than light. Empires panicked, religious orders declared omens, scientists denied reality. If a human could heal a starborn princess, then the balance of power was shattered. Assassination attempts followed swiftly, all failing when Elias instinctively shielded Aelthrea, triggering the same radiant surge. The royal family realized the truth. The bond was mutual. Separated, they weakened; together, they flourished. The emperor made an unprecedented declaration. Humans were no longer laborers or curiosities. They were kin. Years later, the palace shone brighter than ever. Aelthrea stood beside Elias before a council of united species. Their joined hands radiated steady light, not dominance, but harmony. The Starborn had not been saved by power. They had been saved by connection. And the galaxy learned a lesson it would never forget. Sometimes the smallest touch carries the greatest healing. The galaxy did not change all at once. It changed the way ice breaks on a vast ocean, slowly at first, then all at once. In the years following Princess Aelthrea's healing, whispers turned into movements, and movements into revolutions. Every species began to re-examine their oldest records, their forbidden myths, and the stories they had dismissed as metaphor. Again and again, the same pattern emerged. Life had once been shared more freely, not hoarded behind borders or genomes. Connection had been strength, not weakness. At the center of it all stood Elias Carter, the human who had never asked to matter. He remained uncomfortable with ceremonies, titles, and the way entire worlds now leaned toward him when he entered a room. He was still a technician at heart, someone who fixed broken systems and expected gratitude in silence. Princess Aelthrea noticed this more than anyone. She noticed how Elias flinched at applause, how his shoulders tightened under the weight of expectation. She also noticed that when the galaxy screamed for answers, Elias listened. The bond between them had evolved beyond healing. It was no longer a surge of desperate energy or a miracle born of crisis. It was quieter now, deeper, like roots growing beneath civilizations. When they stood together, systems stabilized. Trade routes plagued by conflict calmed. Long-standing feuds softened into negotiations. No one could explain why. Not with equations, not with faith. The Starborn scholars tried to measure it anyway. They recorded harmonic fluctuations when Elias and Aelthrea entered the same region. They detected subtle shifts in quantum probability, events nudging toward balance rather than catastrophe. "It is not power," Aelthrea told the council during one such session. "It is recognition." She explained that her people had once believed themselves caretakers of life. Over time, that belief had curdled into superiority. They had forgotten how to listen. Humans, she said, had never stopped listening. Even when the universe ignored them, they listened anyway. The council did not like this implication. Several delegates openly questioned whether humans could be trusted with such influence. Old fears resurfaced, cloaked in diplomatic language. Elias was present for all of it. He said nothing, until the room grew sharp with accusation. "I didn't heal her because I'm special," he finally said. "I healed her because she was dying, and I was there." Silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable, because no one could argue with that. Soon after, the attacks began again. Not from assassins this time, but from ideas. Propaganda spread across the galactic networks, portraying humans as parasites riding on borrowed divinity. Entire systems closed their borders to Earth. Human colonies reported harassment, sabotage, even disappearances. Elias watched the reports with growing unease. He felt each injustice like static in his bones. Aelthria felt it too, though hers came with visions. She began dreaming of fractures in the galactic weave. Places where connection had collapsed into isolation, so complete that stars themselves dimmed. She woke from these dreams trembling, her biolight flickering erratically. The healers warned her that the bond was being strained. Not weakened, but pulled in too many directions. Connection without consent was becoming extraction. The Emperor convened an emergency conclave. For the first time in recorded history, humans were granted equal voice. Earth sent delegates who struggled to believe where they stood. The question before them was simple and terrifying. Could the galaxy learn to share life again? Or would it try to control it? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. A distant system known as Viox Null went dark. No explosion, no invasion, just silence. Long-range scans revealed something unprecedented. Every star in the system was still burning. But every form of life was gone, erased without violence. Aelthria collapsed when the images reached her. Elias caught her instinctively, their bond surging painfully. Through her eyes, he saw it. A weapon built not to destroy matter, but to sever connection itself. The Council erupted into panic. Such a device meant the end of everything they now understood. If connection was life, then disconnection was extinction. The Emperor turned to Elias, his voice no longer regal but pleading. "You can feel it, can you not?" Elias nodded slowly. The absence in Viox Null screamed louder than any supernova. It was a wound in reality. They did not ask him to go. They already knew he would. The journey to Viox Null was long and silent. Aelthria insisted on accompanying him despite the risks. She said the wound would not answer one voice alone. As they approached the dead system, instruments failed. Not from interference, but from lack. There was nothing for them to measure. When they crossed the threshold, Elias felt something tear inside him. Not pain, but grief so vast it nearly crushed his breath away. Aelthria cried out, her biolight dimming dangerously. They held hands, anchoring each other. The bond flared, not outward but inward, drawing them deeper than they had ever gone. They understood then. Connection was not something they projected. It was something they allowed. Together, they reached into the void. Not to command it, not to heal it, but to acknowledge it. Elias spoke first, though no sound carried. "We see you." Aelthria followed, her presence weaving gently around his. "You are not forgotten." The void responded. Not with light, but with memory. Echoes of lives once lived, voices once silenced. The bond trembled under the weight of it all. Elias nearly let go. But Aelthria tightened her grip. "Stay," she whispered. And he did. Slowly, impossibly, something changed. The stars of Viox Null did not reignite. But the silence softened. Life did not return. But possibility did. When they emerged, both collapsed, barely conscious. The healers worked frantically, unsure whether either would survive. For hours, the galaxy waited. Then Elias breathed. Then Aelthria's biolight steadied. The Council received a final transmission from the dead system. A simple reading, impossible by all known science. Potential detected. The weapon that had severed connection could not erase it entirely. Because connection was not a force. It was a choice. In the aftermath, the galaxy changed for real this time. Borders loosened, hierarchies dissolved. Not overnight, but irrevocably. Elias refused every title offered to him. Aelthria declined the throne when her father stepped down. Together, they chose something else. They became listeners, traveling from system to system, restoring not what was broken, but what was ignored. History would struggle to name what they were. Heroes, catalysts, anomalies. But the stars knew better. They remembered the moment someone reached out without expecting anything in return. And the universe, for once, answered back. After Vioxx Null, the galaxy grew quieter, not peaceful but attentive. Empires that once shouted dominance now spoke in careful tones. Worlds that had hidden behind fleets began opening channels instead. Elias and Aelthria did not return to the palace immediately. They remained aboard a small diplomatic vessel, drifting between systems that had requested nothing officially. These were the places that suffered silently, the forgotten edges of civilization. On a mining moon stripped nearly bare, they met workers who had not seen sunlight in generations. When Elias walked among them, machinery stabilized without adjustment. When Aelthria listened to their stories, despair eased into something bearable. No miracles occurred there. No sudden healing, no radiant surge. Just relief. The Starborn scholars struggled with this phase of the bond. It did not register on instruments as power. Yet it reshaped outcomes consistently. Conflicts delayed themselves. Accidents narrowly missed. People chose differently. Elias noticed it first during a failed uprising on a trade station. Security forces were ready, weapons primed. One harsh order away from bloodshed. He stepped between them without thinking. Not as a savior, but as someone tired of seeing fear make decisions. Aelthria stood beside him, silent but present. The order never came. Later analysis would show no external interference. Just hesitation. That frightened the galaxy more than miracles ever had. Because it meant no one was in control. Back on Earth, debates raged endlessly. Some hailed Elias as humanity's ascension. Others feared he represented its erasure. Elias refused to engage. He sent a single message instead. I am still human. The words spread farther than any broadcast. Not because of who sent them, but because people needed them to be true. Aelthria faced her own reckoning. Starborn traditionalists accused her of diluting sacred lineage. They demanded she reclaim the throne and assert dominance. She listened patiently, then declined again, explaining that leadership without listening was merely noise. This fractured her people, but fractures allowed light through. New voices emerged, younger, uncertain, hopeful. One evening, while drifting between stars, Elias finally asked the question he had avoided. What happens when we stop? Aelthria considered this for a long time. Her biolight dimmed thoughtfully, then steadied. Then others will begin, she said. She explained that the bond had never been exclusive. It was simply the first reopened pathway. Connections spreading outward did not weaken it. That night, Elias dreamed without visions for the first time in years. He dreamed of earth rain, rusted rooftops, and quiet mornings. When he woke, he felt lighter. The galaxy noticed the change immediately, not because something dramatic occurred, but because nothing broke. No crises followed their absence from major systems. No collapses demanded their presence. Life continued, imperfect and resilient. They returned to the palace eventually, not as icons, but as witnesses to a transformation already underway. The emperor greeted them not from a throne, but from the floor. "My daughter tells me the universe does not need rulers," he said. "Only participants." For the first time, Elias felt truly at ease there. Not because he belonged, but because no one expected him to. In the final council session they attended together, a junior delegate asked a question that silenced the room. "What should we call this new era?" Elias glanced at Aelthrea. She smiled faintly. "Call it whatever helps you remember," she said. That life answered when it was finally spoken to. The council recorded many names that day. The era of resonance. The age of shared light. History would argue endlessly. But among ordinary people, the names settled naturally. They called it the quiet time, because the universe was no longer screaming to be heard. And someone, at last, was listening.